Well, the one module to make chips is about the size of a shipping container, and
Okay.
it's like $1 billion to make one module.
Wow.
And I thought it was a Dutch company that had you know, they build the tooling for it. And so we had to
Wouldn't
really do a
surprise
lot
me.
of,
Dutch
um,
do a lot of random
mm,
cool things. We were just
yeah,
there.
were you?
Sure. We did my first time there. We our Europe trip over spring break went to London, and then you asked about the ferry. We did a overnight ferry from England to the Netherlands, which was fun once.
Yeah,
The kids loved it. It was just kind of exhausting for the parents, but
sure.
yeah, we went to Amsterdam. But yeah, the Dutch are very like smart, engineering minded
Mm,
people, I think.
yep,
Maybe it comes from all the like the dikes and stuff, right? Like their whole country is like below sea level.
yeah.
They have all the windmills, I think a long, long time ago they had to figure out like how to be engineers to survive.
Right. I mean, the first at scale shipping industry where they had stocks in the shipping companies and building ships, the shipbuilding industry,
Yeah.
I understand came from there.
Yeah, yeah. I mean they were like the Portuguese first and then the Dutch maybe.
What the
In
Dutch
terms of
did,
like seafarers, yeah.
yeah, what the Dutch did that, from my understanding, is that they sold stock in the shipbuilding company
Hmm.
so that they could build more ships.
Yeah, what was it like the East India
Hmm.
Company or something?
So the idea of selling shares in the company,
Hmm.
so they could raise enough capital to
They
build
kind of
more
pioneered
ships.
the stock market,
Right, exactly.
which is interesting because then, you know, they owned Manhattan,
Hmm.
right? New Amsterdam.
Hmm.
And it was sold to what? Brits bought it from the Dutch, right?
Hmm.
It's just funny. That's where Wall Street is now.
Isn't that fascinating?
That is a really interesting connection, actually. I
Yeah.
wonder if there's any if that's just a coincidence,
Mm.
Seems like it is.
Well, that was a superpower before England.
Sure, yeah. Yeah, like the Portuguese and the Dutch. And
Mm. And it was kind of based on
then
naval
like the
power, right?
Spanish. It was
Yeah.
totally based on naval power. And the
Mm.
Spanish and French and the Brits. And the Brits kind of won out.
Yeah.
But yeah, if you've ever seen that, speaking of movies, that Master and Commander movie with Russell Crowe,
I might have seen
it's
that.
all about just the naval battles between like France and
Oh
England
yeah.
back in like the 1700s.
Hmm.
Literally, like whoever controlled the seas
Totally.
controlled the world, and that's where
Yep.
England won out because they're an island nation.
Right.
They had the natural security, and they were
Mhm.
just better, you know, better seafarers than anybody else.
Yeah, and that was a long time. I mean, that was probably 1,000 years. Whereas like the air power,
Yeah,
the battle for air power became a thing, but that only was like less than
20th
100
century.
years. Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly.
yeah,
And now it's space.
and not really even until like World War II.
Right.
Because like there were planes in World War One, but
Mhm.
I mean there were like guys like throwing grenades out of
Yeah.
little biplanes,
Yeah.
like blimps and stuff.
Yeah, and I just heard it was
Yeah.
pretty funny. My father-in-law went to Brazil, where what's the airplane manufacturer
Oh,
in Brazil?
Embraer.
Embraer.
Oh.
So he went down there on a Boeing kind of thing because he was an engineer for Boeing,
Hmm.
and they gave him the whole red carpet treatment, and welcome to Embraer, and it was their manufacturing facility, and they have this big museum there, and where they tell everyone that they invented flying.
Really?
Yeah, which makes perfect sense because
I mean, maybe they did. I don't know.
yeah, the whole world was testing, and
Yeah.
people were dying in plane crashes trying to get off the ground, jumping off boats,
Yeah,
jumping
maybe
off
they
cliffs.
invented it and the guys didn't survive. The Wright brothers were like
Right.
famously like very good self-promoters, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And they survived.
Mhm.
Yeah, like you said, a lot of people were dying
Mhm.
in airplanes.
And
so
they were-
maybe
and they were
maybe
com-
somebody in Brazil flew first, but
Yeah.
then he died very quickly after
I can
that.
totally see why they have a claim for it because
Yeah.
they weren't communicating with North Carolina, and it probably
Also,
happened
yeah.
within in the same year
Probably.
or within a few months.
Yeah,
of
it
each
took a
other.
long time for news to travel back then.
Right. And so
In France too, like they
Yeah.
were like aviation pioneers, like
Mhm.
the first balloons were in France.
Yep.
I think there's like
And
with cars too, like I think there are a lot of people who are like doing the same stuff around the same time, but like
Mhm.
Henry Ford and the Wright brothers, and they were the ones who kind of like were just good self promoters. Right?
yeah, we just had a better PR department.
Yeah, I think like Edison was that way with
Mhm.
the light bulb, and where they say like fortune favors the bold or whatever, like guys who really get their names out there. And,
Mhm.
you know,
Mhm.
there's definitely people who that's their mentality is like, I will go down in history, and
Mhm.
they are the ones we learn about in school.
Exactly. That's why all the pithy
That's why
comments.
people don't like Americans because we're
Yeah.
like such self promoters. Yeah.
Right. And everything is attributed to like Mark Twain said this or like Benjamin
Yeah.
Franklin said this.
Yeah. I mean, probably 10% of those are actual quotes, right? But
Yeah. I remember we talked about Benjamin Franklin when you were talking about Philadelphia.
oh, yeah. Yeah. He
Right?
was like, I mean, he's like the most famous Philadelphian of all time.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think he was born in Massachusetts. He's buried in Philly,
Mhm.
lived there forever, obviously, founding father and all that.
Mhm.
Yeah. I mean, amazing guy,
Yeah.
so many ways. Kind of like a Da Vinci type, just like polymath.
Yeah. And I just want to,
The Franklin Institute is there.
okay.
Amazing. If
Huh.
you're ever there, take your kids to the Franklin Institute.
Yeah. I want to, learn more about him. And I understand he had basically a newsletter, right? Poor Richard's
Yeah, Poor
Almanac.
Richards. Yeah. I think he started the post office. How to feel it like he founded the post office. Um,
That's
stuff like
visionary.
that. Yeah, he was like the first postmaster of the US, like really remarkable guy. Yeah. He had his flaws like anybody else, right?
Mhm.
Famously
Mhm.
spent a lot of time in France.
Yeah.
not with his wife, but
Oh, really? The
yeah.
most important key features, yeah. A lot of these guys, weren't held back at all. You can see that it probably goes hand in hand. With
Yeah.
super ambitious. They're going to have your biggest strength becomes a weakness. All that stuff for sure.
Yeah.
But Benjamin Franklin and Alexander Hamilton, fast.
Oh yeah. I mean, I think lately with that play and everything, he's become more famous. But yeah, I think he was like pretty much regarded as the smartest guy
Mhm.
of all the founding fathers, right? Like he set up our whole economic system,
Yeah,
capitalism,
the Federal
the
Reserve.
Federal Reserve, the Treasury.
He had the concept of borrowing money as a resource,
Hmm.
and that is genius. To have the
Yeah, it wasn't really a thing before him, right?
right. No.
Yeah.
So that's fascinating for and the key principle for Hamilton, but Benjamin Franklin, I'm not sure other than just pithy comments about Benjamin Franklin. Do you know what he can be? What thing you said? The post office.
Yeah. Well, he, I mean, the list goes on, I think
Yeah.
that Poor Richards,
Mhm.
post office.
Mhm.
I want to say he had a lot to do with like fire insurance and stuff like that, where like people would have their homes protected. So like
Yeah.
if you go around Philadelphia, there's
There's wood homes, right?
well, I don't know if there's too many now, but like
Mhm.
you look on the outside of all these row houses in Philly, you'll see a little symbol on a lot of them, like a
Mhm.
oval
Okay.
metallic symbol where it basically meant this home has fire insurance. So if it's on fire, the fire department would look for that. I think that was his thing.
Wow.
But obviously, like he was a key player in the revolution.
Diplomacy too, probably. Right?
Diplomacy. He was kind of our original like Secretary of State almost.
Yeah.
I think.
Yeah.
Like him and Jefferson.
Right.
I think were the two guys who spent a lot of time in like France, which obviously if it wasn't for France, we would have probably lost the Revolutionary War, right?
Yep. Exactly.
So I think diplomacy.
Hmm.
Um,
And Louisiana Purchase
and
was
then
from France?
just the city of Philadelphia. I think he had a lot to do with like
The city of Philadelphia.
well, that was the first most prominent city, really. Philly and New York, but
Hmm.
I mean, Philly was the capital of America for 10 years, right? Like a lot of people don't realize that. But while they were building DC,
Mhm.
I think New York was the first capital, then Philly, then DC.
Mhm.
So from like 1790 to 1800, I think Philly was the capital,
Mhm.
which was kind of like the most crucial time in the history of America because, we won the Revolutionary War, but our country was kind of a mess after that
Mhm.
because we didn't have a constitution, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, and these are things you learn when you live in Philly. You
Mhm.
can just nerd out on American history, but like
Mhm.
we
For about 10 years, we.
Well, we had the Declaration of Independence, but then
Mhm.
I think the Constitutional Congress was like when, I can't remember, 1780, 1790, around there. So that's when we really like put everything into writing. Like, this is our Constitution that our
Mhm.
nation will be built on. Because the Declaration of Independence was just like,
Mhm.
we're not part of England anymore,
Mhm.
you know?
That's just when it started.
Right. But that's
Yeah.
not like
Right.
it's not like a Magna Carta type thing where you can
No.
like base a nation on the Declaration of Independence,
Right.
right?
Yeah.
But
That's
the
not what it was.
Constitution is like the living document where it's like
Mhm.
obviously still going. But
That's fascinating.
so
That
like
time was
Philly
that.
was like the
Mhm.
capital,
Mhm.
the Constitutional Congress. Yeah. Like Washington lived there. Like if you go to Philly, you can see where his house was in Philly.
Really?
Yeah. It's pretty cool. And it was all just while DC was being turned from a swamp into a city. Why people like call DC a swamp. It's literally built on a swamp.
That's funny.
Yeah.
And,
Anyway, yeah,
and I
that
heard a lot
period
of
of
people.
history is so interesting.
Yeah, I heard a lot of people wanted the capital to be in New York.
Well, I mean, I think it was the first
Mhm.
capital.
Or wanted to stay in New York.
Yeah, they wanted to like,
And
because it was like Philly and New York were like the big, and Boston were like the big cities, right?
competing, right? Cities.
But like Boston, though, like I don't think was ever quite on the same level, right? But like New York, yeah. I don't know if they wanted to like keep like finance and politics separate, maybe, or
Mm.
because New York was always like the financial
Yep.
center, still is. You know, I don't know. There's probably a book about it.
Yeah, that'd be something that's
If
great
there's
to
not
go
a
back.
book
There you go.
we should write.
Yeah, absolutely.